Turn to page 394.
Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban would mark the biggest turning point in the franchise yet. It would be darker, the director would change, and the kids would turn into, like, real people.
That felt good.
Not good. Brilliant.
And the halls of Hogwarts would be cluttered with werewolves and dementors and even Cameron Diaz. So open up that Marauders map as we find out what the happened in this movie. One of the biggest changes for Prisoner of Azkaban was with J.K. Rowling herself. While she would still be involved, she would let director Alfonso Cuarón make changes to the book, a far cry from the pressing role she had on Chris Columbus during Sorcerer's Stone. While he still had to consult with her, so long as Cuarón fit with the spirit of the book, he wouldn't have to be so literal. Many of the ideas, Cuarón relied a lot on writer Steve Kloves, did just that, keeping with the spirit so much that they actually pre-visioned events of the final books, something that amazed Rowling. As the script progressed, Cuarón and Kloves excised a lot of Sirius Black's backstory, chiefly his escape from Azkaban.
How did he escape?
Well, that's the question, isn't it?
Went light on the magic class elements, and much more.
That's not possible.
It's just what I saw.
As far as Cuarón as director, he himself beat out a number of coulda-beens after Columbus stepped away to spend time with his muggle children, switching instead to producer. And some major names were approached but didn't make the cut for one reason or another. Guillermo del Toro didn't love the series' tone. Mark Foster didn't want to work with kids again after Finding Neverland. And M. Night Shyamalan was tied up with The Village and probably wouldn't have gotten a preposterous twist past Rowling anyway. Callie Corey and Kenneth Branagh, who had his share of Harry Potter with Chamber of Secrets as Gilderoy Lockhart, never made it past the shortlist.
Are you going somewhere?
Well, yes. Urgent call. Unavoidable. Gotta go.
Cuarón ended up being talked into it by fellow amigo Del Toro, who urged him to read the books even though he thought it all sounded really silly. He would be hand-approved by Rowling due to her love for The Little Princess and Y tu mamá también. Curiously enough, Radcliffe was also a fan of that very adult film, but considering he used images of Cameron Diaz as an inspirational reference, that might not be a shock.
Is that a hair gel?
Yeah.
Fortunately for Cuarón, Columbus had put the elements in place over the past two movies, and the actors themselves knew what they were doing with the characters and the special effects. For his part, Cuarón would try to avoid patronizing the young cast, but did at least promise not to curse in front of them.
If there's something wrong with the bitch, then there's something wrong with the pup.
Shut up! Shut up!
Cuarón's first order of business was getting to know the core cast, assigning them an autobiographical essay from the perspective of their characters.
Well, actually, I didn't. I never did this.
True to character, you didn't hand in your homework.
No, I didn't do it. It was... I felt really so pleased with myself because you hadn't handed yours in and I felt so pleased. I've done it. So I had mine. The next day Emma comes in with all 16 pages of hers.
The three main stars, Daniel Radcliffe, Rupert Grint, and Emma Watson, returned, of course, as did the likes of Robbie Coltrane as Hagrid, Alan Rickman as Severus Snape, Maggie Smith as Minerva McGonagall, and more. But the cast would grow significantly with this entry. For Albus Dumbledore, Michael Gambon replaced Richard Harris, who died before Chamber of Secrets was even released. Peter O'Toole, Christopher Lee, and Ian McKellen were all considered, but the latter thought it was too similar to Gandalf, and apparently because Harris never liked him as an actor. Gambon played Dumbledore goofier and fit in perfectly, even teaming with Alan Rickman to sound off a fart machine while Radcliffe was in close-up.
We enter completely our own world. And we like to swim and fly.
They had put a fart machine
into my sleeping bag.
This hall echoes.
And Michael Gambon had actually been pressing it during the take, I found out.
Sirius Black would be Gary Oldman, who signed on for the paycheck and to look cool to his kids. Speaking of cool, Black's tattoos were actually designed by Cuaron. Timothy Spall would land Peter Pettigrew. Emma Thompson would play divination professor Sybil Trelawney, and David Thewlis would be Remus Lupin, the new Defense Against the Dark Arts professor, who were replaced more times than the Spinal Tap drummers. As for He Who Must Not Be Named, well, he must not be seen either, as this is the only Harry Potter movie in which Voldemort doesn't appear.
13 years ago, when you stopped...
Voldemort?
Don't say his name.
Sorry.
When you stopped, you know who.
Another significant and beneficial change was in the production schedule, with 18 months permitted, compared with 6 for Sorcerer's Stone and 8 for Chamber of Secrets. Production commenced in February 2003, with the cast and crew returned to their favored Leavesden Film Studios, in addition to making good use of actual locations in Scotland, with numerous in the Highlands, which added to the more reality-based feel of Prisoner of Azkaban. Key locations also included the Dark Forest, built in Shepperton Studios, the Three Broomsticks Public House, Hogsmeade Village, and the Shrieking Shack, a sequence that took over a month to shoot, according to Watson. This location in particular had to feel alive, and it stands as one of the best executed sequences in all of the film. Cuarón too wanted Hogwarts itself to feel more like an actual castle than a series of sets, which was how it came off in the previous 2 movies. Much of this is achieved through cinematographer Michael Saracen, a frequent Alan Parker collaborator who lends Midnight Express and Angel Heart. He replaced John Seale and Roger Pratt for the duties. Saracen would present a darker film overall, and also shot with wider lenses to make viewers experience the scope and scale of Hogwarts. Production designer Stuart Craig too played a vital role in achieving this. A notable crew member change was that of the costume designer. This time around, Janie Tamaim stepped in, replacing Lindy Hemming, who had taken over for Stone's Judiana Makovsky. She was tasked with creating a more mature wardrobe, as the core characters were now in their teens, something reflected in the themes of growing up and discovering yourself, which provided a sort of spine for the story. As for older characters, Lupin was given a disheveled look, like, quote, an uncle who parties hard on the weekends. Trelawney was made to look like, quote, a person who hasn't looked in the mirror for a long time, and Dumbledore was transformed into, quote, an old hippie, but still very chill and with a lot of class. Production on Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban wrapped in November 2003, but there was still a lot of work to do in post-production.
Meanwhile, I'd like a nice cup of tea or a large brandy.
Industrial Light and Magic, Frame Store, Cinesite, Double Negative, and the Moving Picture Company all pulled their weight to complete more than 750 VFX shots, somewhere between Stone and Secrets. Not surprisingly, Cuarón wanted to utilize more puppets than the previous Potter movies, but tests, for the most part, failed. Still, he would be able to combine practical and visual effects for a number of characters.
No, wait! What's this? Amazing!
One was Hippogriff Buckbeak, brought to life as a character, and not just some dumb bird-horse thing, through a team that studied actual horses and birds. From there, it took a team of 15 months to pull off 80+ shots. They also utilized something called an M-rig, which lets models and digital animations interact. One of the greatest challenges for Buckbeak came in the feathers, which the team had to be as realistic as possible with regarding movement, as Buckbeak was seen in daylight, and so flaws would be more easily detectable by viewers. And with special effects gaining more prominence in this digital age, you better believe they'd notice.
Oh, you're gonna regret this.
Class dismissed.
You and your bloody chicken.
Another character that was a combination of practical and computer effects was Remus Lupin, who we find out later is a werewolf. For him, the artist had to determine precise movements on both 4 and 2 legs. There too was Peter Pettigrew, who also takes the form of Scabbers the Rat. And of course there was the introduction of the Dementors, one of the most imposing forces in the entire wizarding world, and to Michael Scott, of course.
The worst thing about prison was the Dementors. They were flying all over the place and they were scary, and then they'd come down and they'd suck the soul out of your body and it hurt!
Dementors like in Harry Potter?
No, not Harry Potter.
They, naturally, posed their own challenges for the VFX team, who had to match timing perfectly to the underwater tests. There would also be the return of the Whomping Willow, in addition to a spectacular depiction of time travel, made possible with a seamless blend of live action, CG, motion control, blue screen, and more. And who can forget the dazzling night bus sequence?
Take her away, Ian.
Yeah, take it away, Ernie. It's going to be a bumpy ride.
Achieved with a team of stunt drivers, one driving the bus at a normal speed while others drove far slower in the surrounding traffic. The entire sequence is a marvel of visual effects.
Mind your head. Hey guys, why the long faces?
On the music front, sadly, this would be John Williams' last outing as composer, but it may be his finest of the entire series. Prisoner of Azkaban would be released in the UK on May 31st, 2004, before hitting the States on June 4th. It would open at $93.9 million, going on to hit just under $250 domestic and $795 million worldwide. This would be the best opening weekend of the series so far, although it still fell short of both Sorcerer's Stone and Chamber of Secrets. Globally, it would have the worst performance of the initial franchise, later only being beat by the second and third Fantastic Beasts movies. Still, Prisoner of Azkaban would mark a return to the Academy Awards for the franchise after Chamber of Secrets was snubbed, with the visual effects and score garnering the sole nods.
Well, that's just a thought I can understand if you don't want to.
As it stands, Prisoner of Azkaban is one of the best reviewed and respected of the entire Harry Potter series. IGN later called it one of the 10 best fantasy films ever, while Empire named it one of the 500 best films of all time. Alfonso Cuarón would call it the 2 sweetest years of my life and expressed interest in returning, but would not, saying he was too lazy and that he needed a long siesta and that it would be an overall disservice to the franchise to helm the next movie, 2005's The Goblet of Fire. As for Goblet of Fire, well, you'll have to wait until next time as we continue covering the entire Harry Potter franchise here on What the F*** Happened to This Movie?